Hey everybody, this is KOHDOK here, and it's my birthday! And you know me, I always do something special on my birthday. At least what's left of it. But this year, rather than showing off some other things, I figured I would get a little indulgent. So about a week ago, on their special internet stream, the Pokemon Company decided to celebrate its 27th anniversary that they would, in fact, not be releasing the classic Pokemon games for purchase on the Nintendo Switch mere days before they are set to be removed from the Nintendo 3DS eShop forever. Which was certainly a choice. You know, these days it almost feels like Game Freak is afraid of their older games. Like, if people started playing them and saw all the love, care, and craftsmanship that went into them, that they'd start demanding that the newer games contain that same level of attention. And Game Freak doesn't want to throw off their status as a company relying on brand recognition to churn out mediocre garbage. It's why the Diamond and Pearl remakes were farmed out on the cheap and monstrously overpriced, to make their modern slop look good by comparison. Because I guess that's all the single most profitable brand in the history of the world with basically bottomless resources is capable of? I mean, after hiking the prices of the games tremendously, starting with Pokemon Sword and Shield, they go off and announce that the DLC for their newer games, Scarlet and Violet, will cost $35.
Yes, I remember the days when an entire Pokemon game cost $35. You only paid the $35 and you got the whole thing, the entire Pokédex, post-game content, anything you could have asked for. I remember when Pokemon Platinum came out and it was the best game in the series. And then they put out Pokemon Black and White, and Pokemon Platinum was still the best game in the series.
I mean, yeah, after that, starting with Pokemon X and Y, we got a $5 price hike to $40, but that was justified by the fact that the games were moving to full 3D. Pokemon Sword and Shield's $50 price hike, on the other hand, was not so well justified. But people bought it, so it'll always be slop now. Yippee! PS2 era graphics with PS1 era pop-in and draw distance till the end of time. Magikarp shall stalk the grass forever. Game design. And don't tell me the Switch can't handle it when it can handle Persona 5 just fine. But yeah, all I've done so far is whine and complain. Hey, it's my party and I'll cry if I want to. I thought the point of this video was for me to get indulgent, so I will take that opportunity. If I were asked to make a Pokemon game, any Pokemon game, what would I make? Well, actually, funny enough, if there were no strings attached to what I could make, I wouldn't make one of these kinds of Pokemon games at all. I'd actually make something a little different. So, my idea is called Pokemon Fiesta, and it's basically Mario Party with Pokemon. Well, again, it is my birthday, I'm allowed to have a party. And yes, the game would have a feature that would let you bring in Pokemon from your current save files to use them as your character pawn. And when the game ends, all of the star equivalent things that you're trying to collect to win the game, I guess we'd make them presents in this case, become prizes that you can send back to your save file with a big grand prize for the winner. Cool stuff like apricorn balls, hold items, evolution stones, battle points, etc. It's a party game with built-in party favors. Of course, there would also be rental Pokemon, which would be more expressive with better animations and unlockable costumes and stuff for people to play even if they don't own a mainline game. And as a nice little cherry on top, I'd add a feature that lets the grand prize winner give their prize to somebody else at the end of the game. Just a neat chance for someone to be kinda magnanimous or help somebody who's maybe having a bad day. I am actually a huge fan of games that act as companion pieces to the mainline games, and honestly, I think Pokemon is popular enough that people would totally be into this, especially since it's a new way for their Pokemon to interact with each other. But yeah, I know what you guys have all signed up for. If I was to make a mainline Pokemon game, as in one of the ones with the colors or the diamonds or whatever on it, what kind of game would I make? Well, Now, it goes without saying that Pokemon has a notoriously divisive fan base. The struggle between people who want nothing but new Pokemon and those who want the older Pokemon to receive more love is sort of an unsolvable problem that Game Freak only recently managed to work out with regional variants, basically new forms of old Pokemon, though even this is starting to lose its luster. And then you have the eternal complainers, the folks who complain that Whitney's Miltank is too hard despite all of the things you're given to beat her with. Or the people who complain that things are too hard after they bypass tons of content and all of the experience and treasure within that would have helped them out. The ones who say Pokemon Coliseum is bad because of its high difficulty and a lack of Pokemon variety, even though that's the point. These are apparently the people that Game Freak have decided are the ones to cater to in recent games. Well, I won't. I mean, I won't exclude them, but I won't cater to them either. After all, it is totally reasonable for a game to expect mastery, or at the very least a high level of competency from its players when you reach the end game, but I would include that complexity in a way that does not exclude the inexperienced or the whiny. Although I have a bit of a controversial start to it, because I would not make an open world. Making the game an open world takes away that carefully tailored difficulty curve that we got in the previous games and replaces it with a big, empty world that it fills with pointless busywork. Because of how mushy and aimless Scarlet and Violet are, newer players simply haven't experienced what a carefully planned sequence of events can provide in terms of progression, story, learning, and challenge. The experience I've had playing Pokemon Scarlet feels like they took an immaculately planned 4-course meal, shoved it into a blender, dessert and all, and blended it into this bland, homogeneous slurry, where all the flavors are horribly mixed and nothing really stands out. It's a nightmare. It's been sad watching Game Freak struggle to make their stupid ideas work, like how they've had to bend over backwards with their more open-world games to avoid the Dugtrio problem. By making the experience more linear, the game's designers can tailor the events and difficulty with the knowledge of where the player will be at the time and what resources they will likely have access to. I would bring back this curated experience, but I would do so cleverly. No longer will we have straight line roads or wide expanses of nothing. We would replace them instead with broader areas that have lots of fun places to romp around in. You might be familiar with some of the early routes of Pokemon Generation 3. I would build it kind of like that, only with the more natural setting you get with places like Poco Path in Scarlet and Violet. It would also follow the growth charts from previous regions, where you actually get an increasingly growing sphere of influence as you gain new abilities, making more of an outward progress rather than a forward one. And to help liven up these new routes, I would bring back hidden machines. Hear me out. Now, the problem most people have with hidden machines is that they are required moves that your Pokemon use to interact with the field, but in order to do so, you have to replace one of the Pokemon's limited attack slots with the hidden machine moves, and these hidden machine moves cannot be deleted by normal circumstances, which is there to prevent soft locking, as if you deleted that move while you're still using it, well, if you're using Surf to ride on a Pokemon's back, that's not gonna end well. But here's the thing, hidden machines are awesome, actually? At least thematically. I mean, think about it. You and your Pokemon, the ones that you caught and raised, not some bicycle you get handed by somebody else, are working together to explore the world. You can't tell me that's not cool. Hidden machines also allow the designers to add natural gates to progression and incorporate detours on the routes to prevent them from being so disposable. Spotting barriers and the treasures beyond will entice players to explore and build anticipation for when they can come back and explore these areas properly, rather than the sort of one-and-done routes we got in later games. But complainers complained, so Game Freak got rid of them. And so a world of boring, disposable areas was born. But the thing is, all of these problems that people would have with hidden machines are a thing of the past, thanks, ironically enough, to the game that got rid of them, Pokemon Sword and Shield. These games introduced the Coffee Stand, a location in every Pokemon Center that allows you to freely change your Pokemon's moves whenever you want. And seeing as Pokemon Centers are already a safe place that players can freely travel between, why not take advantage of this to bring hidden machines back? In my game, we would swap out those coffee shops with what I call adventuring guilds. These little booths would be laden with adventuring gear and treasure, and the one in charge of the booth would be like dressed in classic adventure gear, you know, the pith helmet and everything. Visiting these places to change your Pokemon's moves would be like changing your loadout for an adventure. The guide would give recommendations and hints as to what hidden machines are needed for each area, as well as acting as a rumor mill to help players find out where cool locations, adventures, and treasures might be. And rather than bypassing the areas or getting bored with monotonous content, the players who follow these rumors would find cool experiences waiting for them. Like, remember in the original Red and Blue how you kinda bully a guy into giving you a fossil? Well, what if instead you met up with that guy at the entrance to the cave, he tells you all about the cool fossils you can find, and the two of you work together to explore the cave and solve puzzles, sort of like the helpers in Diamond and Pearl. And at the end, he gives you first pick a fossil, and the two of you part ways on amicable terms. Cool, right? You get a neat story, a bunch of battles to level up your Pokemon, cool treasures, and even a big prize. It would not take too much work to add these sorts of mini adventures that just wait on the normal routes for you to find. No busy work necessary, kinda like playing an episode of the anime. Another thing I would do is make the gym leaders more challenging. Gyms used to be something that filled players with dread to confront, where they act as a fair judge of a player's progress and ingenuity, full of puzzles and trainers to practice with. Famous leaders like Misty, Koga, Whitney, Claire, Watson, Winona, Rourke, Fantino, Crasherwing! Oh! Leaders that gave you a run for your money if you were unprepared. Modern gym leaders, by comparison, are kind of dull. I mean, they might have an interesting design on a surface level, but they've otherwise left no impact. You know, I don't even remember what Pokemon she used. The only challenge I got in my Violet playthrough was when I skipped 3 whole gym leaders to jump straight to leader number 7. It was a hard fight, but my reward was an increase to the level cap I could control that was still lower than the Pokemon I had just faced. Not even high enough to let me use the local wild Pokemon. I pressed myself to find challenge and got no meaningful reward. Nothing cool for sequence breaking or taking on a challenge that was higher than my level. I'm also never going to see this woman ever again. I mean, even Sun and Moon was better at this with their leaders. Even after you battled them, you could join the various kahunas to do certain activities. Having sushi with Nanu or noodles with Hapu were one of my favorite activities in the post-game. And Hapu was actually difficult. People remember Hapu. But in the Switch games, the only gym leader I remember was Opal from Pokemon Sword and Shield, and that's because she cheats! More gym leaders like this, please! Boss fights are times where it's okay to break the rules, and gym leaders with interesting gimmicks would be a welcome challenge. So I see gym leaders that exude a similar presence. Like, I see a ground gym leader whose gym is under permanent sandstorm to buff his team with their sandstorm abilities, frustrating the player. It would be a difficult fight with an interesting payoff. Other gym leaders might even play a bit dirty. The big gym leader they pushed for Scarlet and Violet was Iono, a VTuber who runs on donations. Couldn't they have leveraged that to where she gets super chats in the middle of battle that make her Pokemon stronger? But of course, while my game will come with an increase in complexity, it will also extend a hand to invite people to indulge in that complexity. That's one of the things I think Pokemon has really struggled to do lately, and that's convey the fun that can come from its complexity. Older games did a much better job of this by, believe it or not, limiting player options, which they then worked to make the most of. In my game, at regular times on their travels, players will encounter someone I call the Fisherman, though a lot of people who play the game would eventually call him Dad, because every time he appears, he'll show the players how to do something cool and give them a neat present. Like, he'd teach them about getting items from Pokemon at the same time as he talks about fishing, handing over both the fishing rod and the TM for Thief, explaining how to combine the two. That desert gym, he'll meet you at the front door and hand you the TM for Rain Dance, which any player who has paid attention will know dispels Sandstorm, making the gym fight a lot easier. Ah, but what about a gimmick? Modern games have got to have a gimmick, right? Well, something that's obvious Game Freak is struggling with is, again, the Doug Trio problem.
Dude, it's Doug Trio! Oh, 3 Diglets! And they're all angry!
They want to include powerful Pokemon that scare and challenge the player, but the problem is, since those strong Pokemon are, well, Pokemon, the player can just capture them and use their power for themselves, meaning they have to bend over backwards to prevent players from actually using the powerful Pokemon thrown their way. Or they simply don't, like in Legends Arceus, which broke the game. My solution? A field status that I call Enraged. While exploring, you'll sometimes come across Pokemon that are cloaked in a mysterious red aura. They're also very aggressive and will chase the player, and if you get into a battle with them, their anger will flare, causing their levels to temporarily skyrocket. Now, you can catch these enraged Pokemon if you get their HP low enough, but it will lose its aura and all of those temporary levels, dropping down to what it was at the start of the fight, though these Pokemon would still be worth the trouble. They would have good stats, maybe some unique moves, or just be a rare species in general, bringing the danger without busting the power curve. Newer players will dread and avoid them, while experienced players will relish the challenge. Though once those newer players get a bit stronger and thus have a boost in confidence, they'll come back for their revenge. They can spice up locations, blockade areas, and give the dungeons a genuine sense of dread that's just been absent from the most recent games. And I mean, come on, just imagine the live streamer reactions. Now, for an added twist, this enraged mechanic can be sort of controlled by the player, with the player gimmick this sort of special stone that, in battle, functions kind of like the super meter in a fighting game, filling as moves are performed and can be spent at several levels to, say, increase a move's power, guarantee a critical hit, or even revive old gimmicks like Mega Evolution or Z moves at their highest levels, making it a sustained mechanic rather than the one-shots we keep seeing. Of course, it would fill more if you use damaging attacks, and you would get a huge boost if one of your Pokemon gets knocked out, meaning it's a mechanic more for breaking deadlocks than letting the winner simply win more. The story conceit is that Pokemon are unable to use this red energy properly on their own, but when they work together with a human, they can bring out this true power. But what will this whole thing be about? The creamy center that this experience is wrapped around? At this, I'm actually kinda stumped. Honestly, bringing back the structure and pacing that generates a memorable experience while building on the advances of more recent generations are more important to me. I don't really have, like, a big story I want to tell, but I do have some ideas that I think would work out. You start the game in Smalton, your humble hometown located in the Kinses region, based on some vague location in Eastern Europe. In this town lives the eccentric Professor Bonsai. Professor Bonsai specializes in the research of Pokemon attacks, hence why his partner is a Smeargle, a Pokemon capable of learning any attack. Professor Bonsai needs help making the Attack Dex, a new type of Pokedex that catalogs Pokemon attacks alongside Pokemon types. You can play the animations of any attack you've encountered and even have any Pokemon perform that attack. Magikarp using Sacred Fire? You bet! And in exchange for testing the prototype in the field, he will let you have a rare Pokemon and a trainer pass. But here's what I think would be the first neat trick. Professor Bonsai doesn't just give you your starting Pokemon. Instead, he leads you to a paddock where the starter Pokemon are playing around and lends you one of his powerful Pokemon to capture one of them. Neat, right? Not only will your starter be the first Pokemon you ever get, but also the first one you ever catch. It's the starter and capture tutorial all in one, letting you learn the value of moves like False Swipe and getting to briefly glimpse the power you will have in the future. The idea here is that there are checkpoints in this world, and you will only be allowed to pass these checkpoints with the proper paperwork, in this case, gym badges. Gym badges act as certification that allow people more freedom to move about in the Kinses region. Each time you beat a gym leader, your trainer passbook opens up and the proper location is stamped with the symbol of the badge, kind of like a passport. And this is quantity-based, so there would probably be some parts in the game where players can choose their own path. This badge access system, combined with the returning hidden machines, create what I call toll booth progression. When people say linear in the sense that they're being negative, they often mean a railroad, where every decision regarding story progress is basically out of the player's hands. A toll booth style instead places an obstacle in the way of the player that they will eventually have to deal with in order to progress, but they can approach this toll booth however and whenever they want. The cut bushes in Cerulean City, the sleeping Snorlaxes, and Koga's gym badge are perfect examples of toll booth design. The big driving story would be to try to complete this attack dex as well as possible, as the professor will regularly give you rewards for doing so. But what about the rivals? Rivals have become a really tricky subject in the world of Pokemon, and I think the developers have kind of forgotten how they work. They seem to have gotten lucky with rivals like Gary and Barry, but in Generation 5, they tried to make the rivals your friends. However, this created a paradox. The story expects you to treat these people like your friends, your best friends, people who you know and should care about. However, this collides with the fact that you have to win every battle without mercy, or else you're not allowed to progress. This creates a situation where you basically have to treat your friends unkindly, manifested most prominently with Bianca from Pokemon Black and White. After a traumatic experience where her Pokemon gets kidnapped, the game prevents you from advancing until you crush her spirits further by obliterating her in a Pokemon battle. I have stress tested this. There is no way around this confrontation. From there, we had a continued spiral. The mistreatment paradox comes down hard again in X and Y, and Sword and Shield gave us Hop, a chronic mansplainer who sort of ignores the reality check he's given. And Nemona... Anyway, what is the magic formula that made older rivals work so much better than the newer ones? The forgotten formula that has slipped out of Game Freak's fingers. Some people have had theories, like Gary's abrasive personality, but I think the answer is a lot simpler than that. A rival should be satisfying to defeat. Gary's a jerk, so you want to see him taken down a peg. Silver is a crook who seriously needs to change his way of thinking. And Barry is obnoxious. Beating him is like smacking him with a newspaper. They all deserve it. These rivals are satisfying to fight, not vulnerable friends with wavering confidence that the game forces you to pummel. Do you know what I would have done in this situation? Literally anything else. I would have taken her to ice cream. I would have sat down and had a chat. Heck, Pokemon Black and White has a pair of twin brothers who operate a battle subway and participate only in double battles. Maybe they could have shown up and saved this entire situation by challenging the two of you to a battle, and you could have instead supported your friend who was suffering from wavering confidence instead of beating her to a pulp for no reason. So, how would I avoid this? Well, like I said, good rivals offer a satisfying arc that doesn't collide with the must-win paradox. So, admittedly a bit like Black and White, we have two rivals who have also been handed attack dexes by Professor Bonsai to work on and level up. A friendly rival and a hostile rival. The friendly rival is actually less interested in battling you and more in adventuring together. A number of those team-up quests I mentioned before would be at the behest of this friendly rival. And if you beat him in battle, it's no big deal. They are instead reassured that they have such a reliable friend. They'd probably tell an awful joke beforehand to warrant that newspaper smack. The hostile rival is a haughtier sort who goes down a bit of a dark path, obsessing over power and growing more distant from you and the friendly rival. And standing up to them to help them realize what's happening is an important part of their character development. The thing is, these two might sound kind of familiar to you. It's an evolution of Hau and Gladion from Pokemon Sun and Moon. Hau is an obnoxious type who gets the newspaper treatment, while Gladion is lashing out aimlessly and needs to get his head on straight, with you helping him realize where his focus should really be. They actually got, like, a lot right in Sun and Moon, and then just kind of forgot about all of it, I guess? Although, speaking of other things Pokemon Sun and Moon does right, what about our requisite evil team? Now, evil teams in Pokemon have been a bit of a roller coaster, starting with Team Rocket, a gang of ambitious mafiosi, eventually being upstaged by the ecological terrorists Team Aqua and Team Magma, before those were upstaged by a cavalcade of death cults. Like, literal death cults. A disturbing number of death cults for a series aimed at children. Sun and Moon brought the crazy back down with Team Skull, a gang of hooligans with no crazy aims for world domination. Don't get me wrong, Team Skull was absolutely a breath of fresh air, but Game Freak seems to have taken all of the wrong lessons from that, because following them, we got Team Yell and Team Star, teams so lacking in menace and presence that they might as well be bad comedy. You see, one of the big reasons Team Skull worked is while they themselves were not terribly ambitious, they were flunkies, a hired distraction used by the true evil, which created a far more interesting story. It is based on this that I have my idea. Placed somewhere between Team Rocket and Team Skull on the craziness scale, less ambitious than the former, but much better organized than the latter, I give you Team Darksteel. Gee, I wonder what Pokemon types they like to use. Yeah, a bit of a try-hard name and design, I know, but these guys are all about intimidation. They aren't crazed mafiosi or just plain hooligans, they are muscle for hire, mercenary goons that have gotten a lot more active recently as our story begins. They're as bombastic as Team Aqua and Team Magma, shaking people down, invading spaces, and stealing ancient relics, but not so crazy that they do anything rash. In fact, you showing up tends to be more of an inconvenience for them than something to get truly angry over. And of course, you'd rather not get involved with these people, but they have a nasty habit of showing up where the player is headed and inevitably come to blows. They might even be the subject of some more of those side quests. And Team Darksteel are professionals. They are actually threatening, using things like strong Pokemon and status techniques. When the players encountered them, they'd be like, oh no, it's these guys again. As the story proceeds, we learn Team Darksteel didn't used to be so aggressive, and only recently, with a client paying them huge amounts of money, have they started behaving this way. This would pan out with the players confronting and battling their leader multiple times, eventually earning their respect and helping him realize that selling his soul for gold was a mistake. There'd be a triumphant moment where he goes up to the real bad guy and rips his contract to shreds. Another case of your actions helping someone for the better, again ignoring the must-win paradox. Of course, we'd confront the actual big bad guy, some trust fund baby who feels entitled to everything, including the legendary Pokemon for this game, and the Pokemon gets like corrupted by the greedy desires of the bad guy, infused with monstrous rage aura, and they turn into an epic multi-stage boss fight where everyone you've become friends with tag teams you for each stage until you finally break the bad guy's grip and the legendary Pokemon returns to normal. And the day is saved, and soon after this you can go out and find the legendary Pokemon who, as thanks for rescuing it, will allow you to fight it as many times as you want until you catch it, and then you can finish the game and the rival who went so bad before has a clear head for your final battle, and it turns out the fisherman was the champion all along, and yeah, okay, it's kind of vague. Like I said, my goal was more of a return to the structured experiences of the prior games, a structure that makes for way more memorable experiences. It's a shame that the word linear has become the new dirty word in gaming the way single player was just a few years ago. Wait, single player, is that 2 words or is that just a hyphenated? Whatever. I've found that a lot of people sort of take for granted the amazing experiences that can come from properly implemented linear design, and that they forget the importance when asking for open worlds, expecting to receive that linear experience, but somehow without the linearity. That rarely works out well. So trust me, play the older games. Take my advice, and as you play these older games, be sure to thoroughly explore every area, battle every trainer, and only catch the Pokemon you really want to use. I know it sounds hard to believe, but trainer battles are actually really fun when they aren't all laggy and unfulfilling. Just don't skip anything and you'll stay on pace with the rest of the game. No out-of-the-way grinding necessary. Again, my recommendations are the games from Generation 4. Any of them. Even the dog-looking remakes are perfectly playable, but my favorites remain Gold, Platinum, Moon, Yellow, and Ruby. The remakes for these two are also great, and I'd say actually surpass the originals.
Yes, I remember the days when remakes were made using the most recently made Pokemon games as their base, saving them tons of time and money on script writing and programming, enabling them to make a polished remake for an incredibly low budget. The days when common sense carried the day.
So, yeah, that would be my vision of a perfect Pokemon game. One with a stronger central axis and a hint of danger. One that sets more boundaries but encourages players to push against them. A game tailor-made to deliver an unforgettable experience. No vacant open-world clout chasing, no mushy experience, no gosh darn lag. Just Pokemon the way it was meant to be. And they'd better make the game I've described because, you know, it's my birthday, and wouldn't that be swell? Until next time, this is KOHDOK signing off. You know, I need to get myself a Pokemon hat.